RWBY episode 14, Forever Fall Part 2. This episode, it gave us the conclusion to the Jaune versus Cardin, sort of arc, really. And the one thing that we really got that I kind of called last week is that, Jaune does use his aura to pretty much defend himself, at least in, one specific moment. And that's kind of the one thing about this that disappointed me is that he kind of released his aura and it pretty much healed him and blew Cardin back, but that was about it. He didn't use it. It wasn't one of those moments. I didn't expect him to instantly gain control, but I thought him being so emotional towards, Pyrrha and, his entire team being attacked, that would kind of cause him to basically be in sort of a aura mode or whatever while he was fighting Cardin. But how it actually plays out is pretty well done too, and it does come as a surprise. It's him and Cardin pretty much, and he's getting beat up, and then his aura heals him, blows back Cardin, and then after that happened, a giant Ursa comes out, and Cardin's team, they just pretty much run off, and he gets attacked because of course he has the jam on him. So the Ursa attacks him. Jaune is the only one who stays, and then of course Pyrrha, RWBY, and Weiss end up, in the fight, or at least there to see the fight between Jaune and the Ursa, because Cardin's team just like runs past them. And something we learned in this episode is, Pyrrha has the ability to for polarity, and I'm laughing of course because RWBY said like she has the oh, you can control poles, which I thought was really funny. But it's interesting that she mentioned that. She says RWBY has her speed, Weiss has her glyphs, and she has the power to control polarity. And I thought that was really interesting because when RWBY mentions how she's like super fast and stuff, we do of course see it, but I always thought it was just exaggerated, because it has sort of an anime style. So it's just she's faster than most people, but it's not actually like super speed, but it really is super speed. So they kind of made it official, I guess, for anyone who, like me, I guess, who just thought it's just an over exaggeration, for action's sake, because that's generally what anime does. They over exaggerate things. But she does actually have super speed, and that's kind of cool, even though we don't get to see it too much. But she compares that to, or Pyrrha compares RWBY's speed to Weiss's glyphs, and I forgot the exact word that she uses to say what the polarity is, but apparently it's what everyone has. So I think everyone in this world, or maybe it's not everyone and it's just specific people, have actual abilities, and they aren't just like great fighters. RWBY of course has the super speed. Maybe Yang has some actual ability, which I would assume would have to do with her kind of going into the rage mode. It's just amplified because when she's fighting people, she has like little shotgun gauntlets, so it's not just her with super strength, which I would assume that's what hers would be, just because of the character she is. It seems like hers would just fit perfectly to be super strength. But it's also hard to tell because of her weapons being gauntlets that just shoot people when she's punching them. So it's hard to tell if that's really it. But I think that's what it is. It's super speed, and it would explain why people fly so far when she's in that rage mode compared to when she normally does it, and they kind of just get knocked back. But I thought the episode was really well done, and like I said, I guess there are two things that kind of disappointed me. The first being that Jaune doesn't really use his aura, to actually fight Cardin. But the second thing is that he doesn't actually win the fight against the Ursa, and it was Pyrrha who kind of, gives him that little nudge in the end when she basically moves his shield up. And I was really, hoping to see him actually defeat the Ursa by himself. And unfortunately, we didn't get that. I didn't expect him to just instantly be like a master fighter, but I really wanted to see him do this on his own, because that seemed like what it was leading up to. And even though it's sort of cliche because that's just how it happens, I still would love to have seen that, because you root for the underdog, and I feel like I'm still rooting for him because he didn't even get to have that moment. It's in his head, but us as viewers and Pyrrha, RWBY, and Weiss also know he didn't actually do that all on his own. But like I wish he did. It would have been cooler. And also he like decapitated the thing, which I thought was really intense. I was thinking, he like stabbed it or something. It was just like nope, just chopped its head clean off. But I just really wish he was able to do it all on his own. But at the same time, if he did, then we wouldn't have learned about Pyrrha being able to, control polarity and, control magnets. I keep saying control polarity, but she has the ability of polarity, which helps her control magnets. But I thought it was a really good episode. And, in the end, Jaune does say, he still asks Pyrrha to train him, and she agrees, of course. And we see in this episode, like last week, she seemed like she was just mad at him because of all the crap he was doing for Carden, and she pretty much knew that something was going on, but she didn't know exactly what. And in this episode, when Carden's team basically says it's a giant Ursa, the first thing Pyrrha says is like, she's worried about Jaune, and so she, goes to save him. And I really enjoyed that because it showed that she was, of course, mad at him for not standing up for himself, but when he's really in danger, she still cares about him a lot, even though he's kind of oblivious to the fact that she likes him. But, in time, he'll figure that out. But I thought it was a really well done episode. They had good comedy, and of course, my favorite thing was RWBY saying, like, oh, you control poles, which I thought was just hilarious. And then, they had the little mention where, about the pancakes, and, there's no syrup because Nora ate it, or I guess drunk it. It was like, that makes perfect sense because in last week's episode, she like drank an entire jar of the jam in like 2 seconds while Ren was trying to, fill up the second jar. But, thought it was a really good episode. I was glad, they settled things between Jaune and Carden. And it wasn't really the way I thought it was going to be. It seemed like Carden feared Jaune more than he, like, just respected him because I thought it would just be like, you saved my life. Even though I was like a horrible person to you, I didn't think they'd really be friends. But he, which I said, last couple of weeks, I figured he'd just be like, hey, I respect you now. You stood up for yourself. And in the episode we see he did save him, but it seemed more like he was just afraid of him because Jaune was kind of just like, don't ever like threaten my team. And then he says my friends ever again. And Carden is just like, he said he has nothing to say. So it seemed more like a fear aspect, like the revolt. The roles kind of reversed, but it was interesting to see that it was kind of that way rather than hey, we can actually be friends now because I was a bad person and you saved my life. And I wouldn't expect Jaune to be friends with him anyway, just because Carden changed his mind. But I thought they'd at least be sort of neutral, and now it seems like it just completely flipped. And even though Jaune won't actually fight Carden or bully him, it still feels like Jaune is now like at a higher level, and he could, beat up Carden if he wanted to, even though that won't actually happen. Or it could, because the show always seems to have some really good twists in it where something seems like it could be cliche, and you might even want it to be that way, but it's still not. But overall, I thought it was a great episode. I'm excited for next week, of course. Every time I do a review, I feel like it's been like 3 or 4 weeks compared to just 1 week. And as I mentioned last week, it has to be because the episodes are so short, but it feels like I wait so much longer to watch the show. So my question to all of you is, what's the worst part of waiting? Is it waiting to see what happens next, or is it waiting to see if your speculations are right, or what is it? So comment below, let me know what you thought of this episode, favorite parts, least favorite parts if you have one. And of course, answer the question, what is the hardest part about waiting? Comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.